Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors and are not those of WKYU-TV, its management, or WKU.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another hot episode of Topper Talk. We are here in the house bringing you another 30 minutes of quality Hilltopper sports talk, and the set looks a little bit different. We've got me, of course, who keeps the Cal Ripken Ironman streak alive with the show appearances.
Still going.
But we have a special guest in the house, be Brandon Phillips of Inside Hilltopper Sports Radio, so appreciate you coming on and being a part of the show, Brandon.
Well, it's my privilege to be here. I'm a big fan of the show, and you guys do a lot of good work.
Yeah.
And I'll try not to downgrade anything for the audience, so it's good to be here.
I paid him to say that, by the way. And in case you're wondering, Inside Hilltopper Sports Radio, you guys are on Thursdays.
That's right.
From 5 to 6.
Yeah, so every Thursday from 5 to 6 on ESPN Radio 1450 in Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in Glasgow or Barron County, ESPN 1230. And, kind of a diverse show. It's been an interesting summer just because this is a time where you can get a lot of guys in studio. Once the season begins with practices and workouts, it's kind of hard to do that.
A little bit harder.
At this time of the year, versus having guys over the phone, you get them in studio, and it's a total different dynamic, as I know you experience on the television side. But it's been a busy summer. We're excited for everything to get started.
Cool. So yeah, you can check that out. I've been known to frequent that show on occasion.
That's right. Yes, you've been a recurring guest for sure.
Yeah. So let's get started. We got, of course, fall camp's going on right now. First full week is in the books. A lot of stuff going on, but first, since you're the special guest on the show, first off, I want to say that Shane is on work duty still,
okay.
And Woody White has a soccer game tonight. He coaches the men's soccer team at Russellville High School.
Right.
That's why they are absent, but we got Brandon Phillips here to hang out with us. So since you're the special guest, I want to ask you about kind of the overall outlook and your opinion of WKU football. A lot of excitement with Petrino and his coaching staff and the talent surrounding that is returning and everything. So what's your opinion on the overall outlook?
Yeah, I think with the changes and all the excitement that's going around WKU football has been pretty consistent with what we've seen with WKU athletics over the last 2 or 3 years, whether it's new men's basketball coach, new women's basketball coach, new baseball coach, new AD. I mean, it seems like every time you turn around, and we experience this a lot on the radio, something was always happening.
Yeah.
So it's a good time to be doing the media side of this because there's a lot to talk about. And I think if you look at a timeline of events and you go back now, and it seems like, and I don't know how it is for you guys, Sean, but it seems like it was years ago that you had this announcement in this press conference that Bobby Petrino was going to be the head football coach at WKU.
Say
and
what?
I think, and some people now, even in the media, they say it's still hard to believe how this has all transpired. But I think it's interesting. I think there was a lot of intrigue and questions around him initially, and everybody knows what came with that.
Yeah.
But, I feel like that's somewhat behind them now, and you're starting to focus on the football side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I've been getting a lot of questions, especially as you look at UK and Tennessee being the first 2 weeks, SEC East opponents, how are these guys going to fare? And I say, I honestly don't know. I mean, I think when you look from last season and Coach Taggart's team to what you have returning this year, you've got some big pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a Jonathan Dowling, you've got an Andrew Jackson. I mean, the list goes on and on. But, what you don't have is a returning quarterback. And as we've seen in college football and professional football, that's a wild card. I mean, that can make all of the difference between a team that wins 9 or 10 games and a team that doesn't go to a bowl. But with that said, you've got a guy in Coach Petrino, and what do we know he's effective at? Well, he's effective at everything. We've seen that at Arkansas. We've seen it at U of L. But he can coach quarterbacks. So I think, right now there's a renewed energy and an excitement. It's based on what this team did last year. It's based on what they think Coach Petrino can do this year. But when you get down to it, Sean, I just think there's a lot of unknowns that we really won't know until August 31st in Nashville.
Yeah, and you mentioned the quarterbacks, and Petrino said this, his practices, he's putting a lot of heat on the quarterbacks, just because he wants to put as much pressure on them as possible in practice, so when game day comes around, it's easier for them. They go out there and it's natural. But one of the things, of course, going into fall camp, fall camp's going on right now. Even though Jeff Brom has said it's an open competition at quarterback, he also mentioned that Brandon Dowdy's a leader.
Right.
And how do you think things like that will shake out by the time fall camp gets concluded?
Not to go back too far, but I mean the fact that, you look last year, Arkansas State, James Morrow comes in and puts in a tremendous performance.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, and of course Brandon Dowdy was a little bit forgot about because of the knee injury. And, that takes a while to recover. So I think, most fans probably thought going into the season it was Morrow's job to lose. And of course, they're not at practice every day, and certainly we aren't either.
They looking at the playbook either, which I'm sure is complicated.
And so he transfers and leaves, and you're thinking, wow. And then Brandon Dowdy has emerged as the front runner. Kind of there's a bit of a romanticism with his story and the fact that he gets his first start. He comes in for K1 Jakes. Everybody was anticipating would that ever happen. He goes down. Jakes comes back in. Of course, the team went on. But I think right now, again, Coach Petrino, and you said it about the quarterbacks, I would expand it to the entire team. They want practice to be as hard as it can possibly be on these guys, both physically and mentally. Because what happens is, as you indicated, Sean, and Coach Petrino has said it, the games become easy. They become the release. That's the fun part, and that's really how it should be. I think there's going to be a lot of attention on Brandon, largely because they're going to have a tremendous running game. They have a lot of depth at running back. But right now at wide receiver, there's not a lot of depth, or at least not a lot of experience. I mean, you've got Willie McNeil, you've got Austin Aikens, and you've got a lot of young guys coming in. And I think Coach Petrino and Brandon said this on your site at wku.rivals.com that the timing, there you go, ching. The timing is off because these receivers are all new.
Yeah.
And the way they break, the things they do are a little bit different. They're still trying to gel as a unit. So I think it's better to have at least a leader in Brandon Dowdy. It wasn't the saying if you have 2 or 3 quarterbacks, you have none.
None, exactly.
So I don't know that they're in that position because I think Brandon brings some experience and has established himself as the front runner, which is a good thing. But what I would say is if Brandon's not able to hold on to that, whether it's DeMarcus Smith or, some of the younger guys, then you start to question, what exactly can we expect from that position this year?
And you talk about the quarterback position, of course, fall camp. I mean, and I talked to Brandon on media day, and he actually was pretty hard on himself, gave himself a C+.
Well, I think it was a C-.
C-, actually, I think, for the first week. And so he's pretty hard on himself. Of course, when you start a new camp the first week, you're kind of knocking the rust off and everything like that. But kind of, going to practice today, one of the first things I noticed, Daddy's on the sidelines.
That's right. Kind of breaking news there, isn't it?
He's working out with associate strength and conditioning coach Scott Wilkes. Doesn't look injured. Not really sure what the deal is with that. Coaches were kind of hush-hush about that, but didn't get any reps in practice. And, it was one of those situations where you would think DeMarcus Smith would step up and do kind of shine today. But it was just really a sloppy practice for the quarterbacks and all. And, there was about a 45-minute lightning delay today. And whenever they came back from the lightning delay shortly afterwards, Smith threw like a pass that was like 5 yards short from the wide receiver, and he did not get a rep the rest of practice. The freshman Todd Porter and JUCO transfer Nelson Fishback, they finished off the practice all the reps. So kind of an interesting development. I don't really think it's going to be too big of a story. It doesn't look like Dowdy was injured, and knowing the character of Dowdy, I think it might be something like as simple as maybe he was late for a practice and was being punished or something like that. That's just my assumption. I don't know the actual facts with that. So.
Right. Well, I think it, in football as much as anything else, it really just depends on how it all pans out. It very well could be something to do about nothing.
Exactly.
But certainly when you've got a guy who's perceived to be your starting quarterback not participating.
You don't want him on the sidelines working
out. It raises questions, and it may not be nothing. He's back tomorrow, and we don't think anything about it. The thing that's intriguing to me about this, and you bring it up, and it's the first time we've touched on it, though, is DeMarcus Smith. Because here's a guy who, was getting a lot of accolades and attention coming out of high school. He's a tremendous athlete. He's kind of this wild card, but we've not, much like Brandon, but because of an injury, we've not seen him.
Yeah, and he hasn't played football in 2 years before the springtime,
and in football, that feels like forever.
Yeah.
If you're out 1 year, it feels like a while. More than that, it feels like forever. So he's intriguing to me. You kind of wonder when you go into a season where you don't have a real, lock on the starting position like K1 was coming in last year, what will Bobby Petrino's trigger mechanism be like?
Yeah.
How far will you go before you start to jerk and make a switch? And again, you're back into this circumstance of, if you've got more than one, you have none. But DeMarcus, to me, presents a total different skill set.
Yeah, he does.
But from his perspective, regardless of the reason that you've got a Brandon Dowdy out of practice, if you get the opportunity to step up, you need to take advantage. And certainly it sounds like from the practice report today, he didn't do that.
Yeah, he didn't do that by far. And like I said, honestly, talking about the newcomers at quarterback, Porter and Fishback, Porter had a sloppy practice too, but at the end of last week, he was looking really good. He can really throw the ball. He can really spin it, throws it into tight spaces. I would not be shocked to see Porter be the backup by the time fall camp ends, and that's just a bold prediction by me. But, he's looking pretty solid out there. Sloppy at times just because he's a freshman. But he's got a lot of talent, too.
Yeah, I think, anytime, and certainly there are special players that come along at the quarterback position in college that come in and play right away and are effective in doing that, and they'll always get better and progress over time. I think the transition, though, from high school to college football, particularly at the Division I level, is such a leap. And in saying that, there's high schools, and we know some in this state, Trinity, Fort Thomas Highlands. I mean, you look at a Bowling Green High locally, but there are high schools that play at a very high level, very similar to what you might see at a small college. But even at the best of best high schools, the number of athletes, the speed of the game, the play calling, everything is at such a high level that, if he's able to do that, my hat's off to him.
Yeah.
But I think when you start looking at, this program as a whole and at that position specifically, in some ways you hope that's not the case, because it speaks to some issues with some guys ahead of him that you would expect to solidify that position.
But, you never know. That's what fall camp's about. It's going out there, kind of showing your stuff and kind of positioning yourself in the rotation,
I don't know how, I've not got a good read on how Coach Petrino views this, but the thing I thought was interesting under Coach Taggart was nobody was really safe. I mean, he felt that competition would breed more competition and success. And, there's two philosophies. I mean, there's having that guy always breathing down your neck, and maybe that's good, maybe it's not. Maybe you need to have that confidence that you're the guy. So I'm not sure how Coach Petrino looks at that. Coach Taggart enjoyed the competition and knowing, hey, someone could take your spot. It's always open, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think, just going to the practices and everything like that, I think Petrino's kind of along the same lines. I mean, it's like I said, even though they said Dowdy's the leader, they said the quarterback position is still open. So obviously they're leaving it out there that if somebody can come in and shine and, look better than Dowdy and get the playbook down and everything like that, I mean, they have no problem plugging him in as a starting quarterback. But it'll be tough. It'll be tough to tell. I think Daddy's got a pretty good stronghold on it. And, I think he'll probably secure it throughout the fall, but we'll see,
When offense sells tickets, defense wins games, and offense sells tickets, and certainly around these parts, attendance is something we're constantly talking about. So hopefully
we got some offense to sell tickets, right?
That's right. That's what we're hoping. It remains to be seen, but that's what we're hoping.
But yeah, and another point you mentioned is the wide receivers. You got Willie McNeil, you got Austin Akins. After that, you don't really have a lot else. But and that's another thing Petrino kind of touched on. During media days, he's going to have to rely heavily on a lot of the freshman receivers that are coming in. And two that really stood out during fall camp last week was Tywan Taylor and Nicholas Norris.
Yeah, I know he's a big fan of Taylor.
Yeah, he's a very big fan of Taylor. After two practices with the newcomers, they actually graduated on the third day and started practicing with the vets on the third day. So that was quite an impressive feat. Nicholas Norris looks pretty good out there, but Tywan Taylor is looking phenomenal out there. He's making some great plays. I mean, of course, he's making some mistakes as well.
Right.
But
which is to be expected.
Yeah, but I mean, he looks really good out there running his routes and everything like that. So, I mean, you could definitely say that Taylor and Norris are probably getting some playing time. And, you also look at Aaron Jackson and Shaq Johnson as well. I mean, those are two others that could probably see some playing time too.
And the thing that I would add that's interesting to me, and again, when we're doing this on the radio show, and fans start asking these questions, I in some ways feel so useless because it's so hard to gauge right now to really provide them any insight or feedback. But think of it like this too, Sean. The fact that when you look at the difference in the offensive philosophies, even for the guys that are returning like a Willie McNeil and Austin Akins, it's a total, it's night and day.
Yeah.
This was an offense last year that's going to run the ball, control the clock. The tight ends are getting the lion's share of all the receptions. And then it would open things up downfield for a big play throughout the course of the game. Coach Petrino is going to, by all accounts, is going to be forcing the ball downfield within his system, but certainly expect more of a deeper passing game, trying to get the ball, stretch the field, hit these receivers. So I would say, you've got the new guys coming in who are adjusting to everything here on the Hill and college football and whatnot. But also the guys who are returning at the receiver position, there's a pretty big learning curve for them.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, they're Division I athletes. They're going to run out there, run past people, and catch the ball. That's the core of
Whether
what they do.
run the right route or not, I don't know.
But getting the system and understanding all of the, the vocabulary that goes with it, the reads, connecting with whoever the starting quarterback may be, I just think it's a little different. I think the new guys certainly have a bigger learning curve, but I wouldn't put it past the fact that even some of the veterans, it's kind of the same boat because things have changed a lot offensively for them.
I think regardless, you bring up a good point. It is a learning curve for everybody, the vets and the newcomers. But I think all in all, if you're going to poll the wide receivers, I think they like this new offense.
Oh, yeah.
They get to be involved heavily.
Well, and I think quantity for sure.
Yeah. It's like last season, you talk about the tight ends and Dole getting a lot of the receptions, and even Andrews, too, out of the backfield. I think Willie McNeil led the team with like 43 receptions for a wide receiver. The next wide receiver on the list that had catches was Rico Brown, who had 9. So it's going to look a lot different in the stat sheet this year for sure. So the wide receivers, I'm sure, are very happy about that.
Well, and I know, we've really kind of run through the offense, and I know we were going to dedicate the whole show to the WKU offense, but one of the things...
I wasn't going to dedicate the whole show.
Right, sells
talking
tickets,
about special
right?
teams, man.
Special team, well, kicker.
We got to talk about the kicker.
But I'll say this, one of the things that really stood out to me from Media Day that Coach Petrino said was his comments on Antonio Andrews, because obviously under Coach Taggart, and Bobby Rainey was like this before him, he was a workhorse. I mean, you look at total yards and touches, he's a handful of yards from breaking Barry Sanders', single season record for all-purpose yards. And he said, we look at him getting 25 to 30 touches a game. That's our feature back.
Yeah.
And we still look at him returning kicks. Now, 25 to 30 under Coach Taggart's offense was just carries.
Yeah.
But Coach Petrino looks at that being, running the ball, touches as far as carrying the ball as well as receptions, and then you throw the special teams on top of that. So what I was curious to see is how will Antonio Andrews' role change? Obviously, there's some depth at running back, other guys that he likes.
Yeah.
I feel good, about him having the ball. So to know that regardless of how it's going to come, 25 to 30 touches, and we can still see him in the return game. Coach Petrino has forgot more than I know, but I know a little thing about Antonio Andrews, or a thing or two, and I think that is a good thing for the WKU offense. The more he has the ball, the better off you are.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things he brings up. It could be, that's kind of like his vision or whatever, but there could be games where he gets 35 or 40 touches a game,
The defense can dictate that in a lot of instances.
Exactly, but I like his philosophy of saying that, anytime you want to have your number one back get 25 to 30 touches a game, but he also brought up the point of Keyshawn Simpson, bringing him in late in the fourth quarter. He's like, I kind of want to see Keyshawn Simpson come in there late in the fourth quarter when the defenses are tired and wore out, and bring him in. And, of course, Simpson's a load to bring down.
Yes.
And, bring him in and run the ball and just kind of run over everybody, because nobody can tackle him anyway whenever they are not tired.
And it's a great point. And I hadn't thought of it in that light, only because we're so used to seeing one running back in the game pretty much the whole time, unless he, needs to come out and get a Gatorade, and then he's back in. But, and I thought another thing that was really interesting when you start looking at the running backs and the transition in offense is the fact that you've got Kobe Smith here, who obviously is very familiar with this offense, having played under Coach Petrino. And, he's a guy that's played at a high level. He played in the NFL for a little while. So I think the kids will probably respect him, and I think it also makes that transition a bit smoother, having a guy who's coaching that position, who knows this offense, and has excelled at the position himself. Not that you have to be. I mean, Lou Holtz, I don't think he ever registered a carry and was a tremendous coach, but I think in this circumstance that's a positive.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're sitting here talking about the offense, so let's talk about the defense. The biggest question mark is obviously the defensive line. So, how do you kind of see that stacking up? I think, just my perception is right now, there's certain players running with the supposed one team, the first team on defense in fall camp, including Gavin Rocker and Raphael Cox have been running with ones. They've been kind of switching them up, though. I think they're kind of trying to find that good mix of players for first team and everything. You've seen players run with the first team, run with the second team. They've been kind of switching in and out. So I think it'll be one of those that they'll probably know. Maybe next week they'll probably have a pretty good set of who will be the starters on that on the defensive line. So
first things first. They had to do it towards the back part of the season last year, but it's very difficult to replace a talent in like a Jamarcus Allen or a Quintera Smith.
Yeah,
and obviously,
if
not for the knee injury, Quintera Smith, who knows where he goes in the draft,
Yeah,
and here he is. He's in a position to make an impact for the Denver Broncos. So I think you've had to replace a lot of talent on the defensive front. So there's certainly some unknowns. I know T.J. Smith has had a big offseason. He's gotten stronger and faster. Gavin Rocker had the surgery following the bowl game, so he's back into the equation.
They've been throwing Bari Boyd in there, too, as an end, as a kind of a pass rusher. He's been doing really well in that role, too.
And I think, you talked about offensively, when you can wear teams down and then in the fourth quarter bring in a big back. Well, let's flip that coin and look at it defensively. I'm a fan of having a good rotation on your defensive front. Because those guys, especially earlier on in the season, when you have the hot weather and you're still getting kind of your sea legs under you, I think, if you've got depth at the defensive line as much as any other position, that's a good place to have depth because you can rotate a lot of guys in, you can keep them fresh to make big plays late in the game. So right now there are certainly some unknowns in who are going to replace some of the big names that we've gotten to know on the Hill defensively over the last few years. But the good news is it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for your guys to step up, to make a name for themselves. And certainly the hope is that you've got depth at that position so you can rotate it throughout the course of a game.
Definitely. And obviously the Hilltoppers need some depth because, like I said, we lost pretty much every starter in that defensive line last year, and especially big names like Jamarcus Allen and Quintarius Smith. So
well, and the thing that stood out to me, Sean, we're talking about this, kind of the conditioning aspect of it, and we talked about it before the show. There was kind of a theme, and I think Coach Petrino spoke for about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And it seemed like no matter what the question was, whether it was, your reaction to this point in the season, talk about the offense, talk about the defense, how are you going to do X and Y, there was a lot of talk about how much stronger this team has gotten in the shape that they were in.
Yeah.
And certainly I think, we assume that with athletics. I mean, they're going to be strong and fast. And certainly when you're at an institution like WKU and you've got the facilities and you've got the coaches, it's just kind of a given.
Yeah.
But that was a real theme for him. And I don't know if that was his intent, to really play that up or if it was just kind of how that press conference went. But he seems to be really excited about the off-season work and where this team is physically. And he spoke specifically to a lot of guys and where they are.
I got a chance to talk to strength and conditioning coach Joe Madej at a media day on Saturday, and he has a really good program as far as getting players adapted to a Petrino style of practices and everything like that. And even I've noticed it. You kind of look at Leon Allen and players like that. It's like, oh, Leon Allen looks lighter, or so and so looks stronger and everything like that. So I think Madej and Wilkes have done a very good job during the summer programs and everybody getting everybody prepared for getting them stronger, getting them more fit, getting them conditioned for the practices and everything like that. And like I said, I think Petrino kind of notices that in practice, and Madej brought up a good point Saturday. He said we've only had one player get injured so far, but it hadn't been any significant injuries. I know DeQual Randall had a little ankle issue earlier in the week, but I think he set out one practice.
Well, and that's the crazy thing about football. Sometimes you can be in the best conditioning and the best shape, and it just takes something fluke, and you're down. But I think when you look at the strength and conditioning guys, they're some of the maybe unsung and unheralded heroes because it's always just such a given. At a certain level, you expect high quality in that staff in the facilities. But I thought it was worth mentioning because it was a consistent theme. No matter as you transition, if you looked at it as a game and you had these 4 quarters of the Bobby Petrino press conference, the one theme throughout it was conditioning and what these guys have done in the off season. So some of that may be coach speak, some of it may be by design, but I think it's important, and it's certainly one of the things that probably goes, not as much as a quarterback competition or how many preseason accolades does Dowling and Jackson have is, what kind of shape are these guys in? And so far, it's one of those things you can check off.
Oh, definitely. And speaking of Dowling, we have a question come in on the TopperTalk TV Twitter account from Steve Reed, our big baller down in Nashville. He asks, has Dowling's tackling improved since last season? It's a work in progress. How about that? One of the highlights I'll mention of last week's fall camp was first full day of pads was Friday. They had a one-on-one tackling session, which was pretty phenomenal. It was like action-packed. You had Andrew Jackson and Kadeem Jones. They were kind of tussling a little bit at the beginning, and Kadeem Jones kind of threw a football at Andrew Jackson. They had to be separated.
That's healthy.
Then they
that's big brother. I mean, that's little brother stuff. I mean, that's just family. That's healthy.
Maybe, but then,
that's good.
Jackson got a little bit of revenge on him the next time. I mean, he blew Jones up, had a massive hit on him and everything like that. I will say about Dowling during this tackling session, not so good. He's still working on his tackling, and even Petrino mentioned that in the media day press conference. He said, Dowling has all the talent in the world, the speed and ball hawking ability, but we're still working on his tackling abilities. And we kind of seen that last year in a lot of games, where he's like the last line of defense, and instead of going for that tackle, he kind of goes for the big hit and kind of whiffs on it a little bit.
I think what you see happens with JD is when he makes a big play on a ball, whether it's a breakup or it's an interception, where he had 3 against Kentucky, he's more apt to, and let me add to that, I'll back up. he's one of these guys, and I can appreciate it. And I say this because he's a tremendous talent.
Yeah.
He likes to come in and lay that shot.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to make a pick or
Wants
he
to be
wants
like
to
a
lay the shot.
Difference maker.
Yeah, and so he'll come in from time to time, and I mean, he got in trouble for this last season, and I don't think
it'd be interesting to see, how that works with the new rule and everything,
Yeah.
like the targeting rule.
Exactly.
So, I mean,
and so I think for him, here's the thing. He's a tremendous talent, and he's an NFL caliber player regardless of how those things develop. Somewhat limited in his role if he can't develop the tackling side, but he's got the talent to play at that level. These guys, when you're as good as a Jonathan Dowling, so much of it is on instinct.
Yeah.
You've got this athletic ability. Most of the times they've had it all their life
Yeah.
since they were kids. They're operating on instinct. And Sean, it's very hard to change a fundamental instinct of a player.
Yeah.
And I think for JD, in some ways, he has positive instincts that we see in his pass coverage and things that he can do athletically and even on offense from time to time.
Yeah.
But when it comes to supporting in the run game, coming up and having to make a tackle in open field when a guy breaks free, he's just not been able to quite get that, and he's a real victim of this instinct of wanting to just lay the smack on, if I can use The Rock here. I mean, he wants to lay the smack down on him.
you can use any wrestling
Well, I appreciate
analogies you
that.
want to.
They're accepted on TopperTalk. Well, good. But, and if he lands one of those, you can forget about it. He's
Yeah.
going to go for him, for the next three
Yeah.
quarters.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't go. So what we saw in the bowl game,
Yep.
we saw it against, not Troy, but ULM. So, I think that's something that he can't change, at the snap
He's
of
been
a
doing
finger.
it so long, it's
Yeah.
kind of hard for him to,
But-
like you said, to just kind of coach him out
Yeah.
of it and everything like that.
So I'm sure, Coach Petrino, they're working on that. You're right. I thought he spoke to that specifically at the conference or at the press conference. So if he develops that side, I mean, he becomes the complete package in terms of a player you would want in the secondary. And,
Yeah.
and I know sometimes we get caught up in the romanticism of WKU and the guys because it's what we cover and it's what we know.
Yeah.
But, you're seeing now a program that has evolved to the Division 1A level. They've made their first bowl game last year, and they're getting the kind of guys that we're going to see on Sunday. And you've got 3 or 4 of them actually right now doing that,
Yeah.
already. So.
And another thing to mention during fall camp last week is we had a lot of NFL scouts in the house checking, players out. And then no one really specific, but I mean, you can also make the assumption that they're checking out Andrew Jackson, they're checking out Dowling, and they checking out Andrews and things like that. Panthers, Patriots, Falcons, and I think there was another team that I can't think of off the top of my head. We're all, hanging out at practice last week. So, I mean, to have NFL scouts hanging around practice during fall camp,
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a big step for Western Kentucky, and it kind of shows the kind of athletes that we have on the roster right now, and being a Division I FBS team.
Yeah, well, I think it's big for recruiting.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're starting to get that kind of attention, and you talked about Antonio Andrews, and that's a guy that, at Fort Campbell High School, back-to-back state championships. He was a quarterback. He was a safety. He was a Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Kentucky. He initially went to the Air Force, was in the academy, decided that wasn't where he
Yeah.
wanted to be. He was able to come to WKU. He could play immediately because he didn't actually enter into the anyways, but and he saw some time, but he's a unique player, and I never saw him as a guy on Sundays coming out of high school,
Yeah.
which it's hard to gauge that point, but now I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely a possibility. And we got less than a minute left, so just real quick, I mean, what are your predictions, record predictions? You got any? Throw 'em out there, man.
Yeah, we did on the radio show. I know we don't have a lot of time, so
Yeah.
I think 9-3.
Okay.
I'm optimistic, and I think they have a good shot at winning the Sun Belt despite the preseason rankings.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. I mean, not that I give out predictions, but I say best scenario 10-2, worst scenario 8-4.
You don't give predictions.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to
just
ride
threw-
on it.
I threw like an area out there, so
Yeah.
I'll give myself some leeway.
Yeah.
So we but anyway, we got about 30 seconds left or so. So want to appreciate you. Actually,
Absolutely.
we got less than 10 seconds left.
Well, thanks
on the
for
show.
having me.
Well,
I
thanks for
appreciate
having
it. It
me.
was
Thanks
good
for
to be
coming
here.
on.
Absolutely.
Brandon Phillips, Inside Hill Topper Sports. Check that out on Thursday nights. And Topper Talk will be back next week. Peace.
This old house is a getting shaky.